Good morning. I encourage everyone to take just a moment to look outside a window and see the beautiful colors, green, yellow, and red, and acknowledge with me, we live in a paradise today, at least. And now, thank you for, show nature some love, but it's not very often that a preacher says, look out the window. But by golly, it's appropriate today, and I hope you enjoy it. What a delightful world we inhabit as we walk around North Carolina State in these beautiful, beautiful days. I visited briefly with people before the service, and I know that there's a number of visitors, and I wanted to give a double welcome to you and to ensure you found the right place. And just keep coming, and you'll enjoy it. And you will find everyone here very hospitable to you as we make our way through this day and after the service and after the special meeting we will have. I share with you these words as we light our chalice flame. The chalice flame, for those who might be visitors to our movement, is a symbol that's found in all Unitarian Universalist congregations everywhere in this country and Europe and beyond, and it symbolizes the spirit of this congregation and has a deep history, an important history with us. And as we light this chalice, I share with you these words from Cindy Landrum. As we kindle this flame, may it spark in each of us connection and commitment to this living tradition and to each other, this community we share. Amen.
There's a gap here at the beginning of the audio recording of our sermon.
An orientation in which we seek to be open to the wisdom of all religious traditions, rather than being devotees of specific religions. So we're open to wisdom from whatever source it might come, whatever religion it might come, whatever tradition. And some wisdom comes from scientific sources, and some comes from human experience, and some wisdom comes from poems, and some wisdom comes from nature itself and our interaction with nature. The sources of wisdom are infinite, and our capacity to learn wisdom is infinite. Wisdom is the map and the guidance that helps us on the journey of life, and each of us is on a journey of life. We want well-being and peace, however we define that. We want to live harmoniously with others. We want to live in a just society. We want to survive ourselves and our families, the challenges and tragedies that life is heir to. We want to be able to heal from the hurts, difficulties, and losses of life. Wisdom is that thing in whatsoever form it appears to us that helps us address those needs. We do not enter life with a storehouse of wisdom, nor do we enter life with wisdom necessarily abundantly available around us. We must acquire wisdom through the living of our days. Each person has to discover what wisdom is for them, because there is no such thing as a piece of wisdom that is equally applicable to every human being on earth. Wisdom must be just right and delicately attuned to the needs of each individual. Wisdom does not come as some monolithic belief system that we must force ourselves to assent to. Wisdom is that which gives us the feeling of release, of aha, this is right and true for me. Wisdom can be found anywhere, from religious sources to scientific sources and anywhere else. My focus today is about wisdom traditions and relationships. Let us consider for a moment what we already know to some extent, intuitively, and that is that relationships are incredibly important. But let me underline that by citing some studies. There's something called the Grant Study that was conducted by Harvard Medical School. It is a 75-year longitudinal study that involved 268 Harvard students, the majority of whom were members of the undergraduate class of 1942, 1943, and 1944. Now, the claim to fame of this study is its longevity over decades and its comprehensiveness in the study of its subject. The persons involved continue to be studied to this day. Some of them have survived. They were evaluated every 2 years by questionnaires, information from their physicians, which they gave consent to, and in many cases, personal interviews. Information was gathered about their mental and physical health, their career enjoyment, retirement experience, and marital quality. The goal of the study at the beginning and throughout was to understand the predictors of healthy aging. Robert Waldinger, a director of the study, there's been several, but he is the latest. He's a psychiatrist at Massachusetts General Hospital and professor of psychology at Harvard Medical School. He stated this: the surprising finding is that our relationships and how happy we are in our relationships has a powerful effect on our health. Taking care of your body is important, yes, but tending to your relationships is a form of self-care. And that was a revelation to us, he says. Close relationships, they found, more than money or fame, because some of their subjects became famous. Ben Bradley, for example, who was the head of the Washington Post for several years, was part of the study. But close relationships, more than money or fame or anything else, are what keep people happy through their lives. Robert Waldinger said, loneliness kills. It's as powerful as smoking or alcoholism, the other two indicators of bad outcomes. Personal connection, he went on to say, creates mental and emotional stimulation, which are automatic mood boosters, while isolation is a mood buster. In a separate study conducted by Brigham Young University and the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, the researchers pooled together data from 148 studies on health outcomes and social relationships. Every research paper on the topic they could find, involving more than 300,000 men and women across the developed world. And they found that those with poor social connections had on average a 50% higher odds of death in the following 7.5 years than people with more robust social ties. That's a phenomenal conclusion of their studies. The point is that the quality of our relationships, which we already intuitively know, we already know that, but it's backed up by tremendous research that the importance of relationship goes beyond just some temporary feel-good moment or moments, but it is something that somehow nourishes life itself. And these studies I cited referred to health outcomes. And that's useful because there's very clear and empirical measurements for a health outcome, death being the ultimate one. And it's much more difficult to measure mental or emotional health, but you know that those are part of this too. So our relationships can have a profound effect on our emotional and mental lives. Well, okay, we've confirmed what we already knew in very strong terms. And so it would seem then that our whole lives would be filled with pursuing relationships that are fulfilling and harmonious and peaceful. But here's the interesting thing. I can say this as a person who has been a minister for decades and has done a lot of counseling, is that some of the greatest human problems arise from relationships. And is not our society one mass exhibition of polarity and divisiveness? Is our country not a huge case study in the tendency of people to not get along? So why is that? And you yourself might be a tad familiar with disturbances in your own relationships within your families. I'm sure all of your families are exemplars of peace and harmony, but I'm talking about other people, you know. So for those other people, let us say, is it not true that human beings have a lot of difficulty getting along with each other? And I would add my own personal experience, because I have worked with congregations and I do interim work, which is helping congregations in between places, in between important beginnings and endings. And I can tell you that within congregations that are filled with wonderful, caring, bright, intellectually robust people just like you, there's a lot of fighting that goes on. And not here, of course, but it's happened other places. Do you see the paradox? Clearly, health, well-being, even to the point of longevity, is rooted in close relationships. And the reality is what? Discord. And we see it everywhere. We don't have to go far to see it. Okay. This is where wisdom comes into play. This is why wisdom is valuable. Remember, wisdom is that thing that provides a map and guidance for our journey on the path of life. Fortunately, there are people who give us hints and visions of what fruitful and productive and harmonious relationships look like, both what to avoid and what to move toward. One of them is Dr. John Gottman of Seattle, a psychologist and professor at the University of Washington. His conclusions are based on in-depth research with couples. He came to fame before 2000, but certainly in 2000, because Gottman predicted a model. He created a model that could predict with 87.4 accuracy whether a couple would divorce or not within their first 5 years of marriage. Now, he did this using samples of thousands of couples. That's a very high percentage rate of correct prediction. Gottman articulated through his research that the following are relationship destroyers. And he talked about them in terms of couples because that was his bread and butter. That's what he did for a living, is talk to couples. But actually, it relates to any kind of relationship of any kind, not just between couples in a relationship of any kind, but between people in a society, between people in a congregation. Anywhere, any type of relationship that is important. And here's what he said destroys relationships. One is unrestricted criticism. The second is unrestricted defensiveness. That is getting angry at someone providing you with a critique of some kind. Number three, contempt. That is really having a sense of despising the other person in some way. And four was stonewalling, by which he meant what we would call distancing or withdrawal. Gottman claimed that the highest predictors of divorce was the presence of any form of contempt, that is really harboring within oneself some bitter contempt for the other. How much contempt do you think is free-floating in our society right now? Think about it. Think about, there's now candidates that specialize in contempt, right? And yes, it can generate a fan base, but oh, the destruction anyway. So do you see how these things work at an individual level of two people and also societal level? Gottman then articulated what enhances relationships. And they were as follows. Number one, understanding each other's preferences, taking the time to understand the preferences of another person. What makes the other person feel seen, understood, and cared for. Number two, make sure your partner knows and understands why you love them, which is to say, don't just say, I love you, although it's good to say that abundantly, but to give them specific reasons why you love them. I love you because you're a very kind person, etc. Make it concrete. Number three, lean on each other for support when things become difficult, because usually as things become difficult, people tend to want to go apart. But you want to stick with it and be with one another through the difficulties. Avoid stonewalling or the silent treatment. Number four, let your partner influence you. Be open to what their preferences are, their point of view. Try to understand it, even to the point of being changed by what the other person says. Number five, solve your solvable problems. Not all problems are solvable, but discuss disagreements openly, calmly, respectfully, and simply agree to disagree when that is necessary. Number six, overcome gridlock. Resolve unresolved issues before they backlog. Number seven, create shared meanings. Talk to those you love and talk about the shared experiences you have that give you with them a special context of meaning. This is wisdom based on research and experience and hard work over decades to discern what is it that allows human beings to thrive together. It also has the character, hold on, of non-negotiable truth. Which is to say, you can break these rules, but you will be broken by doing so. You can flaunt these rules, that which to avoid, that which to move toward. You can be free, and liberate yourself from any kind of restraint, sure, but that will have a consequence. That's what I mean by the non-negotiable truth that is characteristic of wisdom. A second wisdom source regarding relationships comes from a totally different place, because it is my aim in part to show you the diversity of where wisdom can come from. It comes from the 5th century BC in South Asia, from the person known by history as the Buddha. Buddha taught, and his whole life and ministry was about the cessation of suffering. Not finding metaphysical truth, not finding the answers to the mysteries of the world, but to alleviate human suffering. And as a part of that, he created what is called the Eightfold Path, which is the key elements on the path of liberation from suffering as he defined it. One of those 8 elements was called right speech. So he dedicated one of these major points to speech, how we talk to one another. And the Buddha taught that this right speech pattern had 4 parts. They are, number 1, abstain from falsehoods. Do not tell lies or deceive. Speak the truth. Number 2, do not slander others or speak in a way that will cause disharmony or anger between people, which is to say, speak kindly, gently, and helpfully. Think of that. That's really powerful. Speak kindly, gently, and helpful. That's the frame of reference for talking to another. 3, abstain from rude, impolite, and abusive language. Cultivate supportive, uplifting, heartfelt, and encouraging speech. Think of that. Try to speak in a way that will uplift, that will support, that will nourish the other person. Number 4, do not engage in idle talk or gossip, as he called it. Practice speech that is useful, uplifting, balanced, and done with good timing, which is an interesting thing. So the Buddha taught that we should consider as we speak that our speech is useful, pragmatically speaking, factual, helpful, and spoken with goodwill. Pleasant to hear by the other, which is to say endearing, and timely. That is so powerful. That is so powerful. I don't think that many people actually do that in this world, excluding present company, of course. But how many systems do you find that operate on that basis? It's almost like we've flipped it, right? If you look out at the political sphere, notice that with Dr. Gottman, this wisdom comes in the form of don't do this, avoid this, instead do that. Like Dr. Gottman, Buddha's teaching is given as a non-negotiable truth. Again, one of the characteristics of wisdom. Wisdom is the non-negotiable truth about the human condition that is absorbed by each person based on their own personality, which each person must discover for themselves. There is no one on earth who can tell another person what wisdom is for them. If you meet somebody who approaches you with the position of, I want to teach you what wisdom is for you, run in the opposite direction. Because it cannot be done. Nobody on earth can really understand the heart and the depth of another person, but we can all be open to what tradition and what history has brought us, given us as wisdom worth listening to. A congregation, as I understand it, is a place unlike any other place in our society where wisdom is acknowledged, respected, cultivated, and practiced, and people support one another in that process, as you do every Sunday by reading your own piece of wisdom that you wrote to yourself, namely your covenant, at the beginning of each service. We cannot pursue a path of wisdom on our own. It's impossible. We are too prone to mistakes. We are too prone as individuals to make errors, to get out of balance, and we're too, I don't know any other word to use, we are too vulnerable to fatigue, to moral fatigue, so that we need the encouragement of others to support us in that journey. Wisdom, I emphasize, is exquisitely attuned to the needs and personality of each person. It is that thing that becomes real as life for us, and demands, if you will, action from us. There are infinite sources of wisdom. Can we hear them? Do we as a community support one another in finding it? That is the question. I look forward to exploring this issue further with you in the weeks ahead.